Welcome everyone to the October session of Purposeful Life. My name is Amy Ortiz-Day. I'm a program coordinator at the Center on Disability and Development. The Purposeful Life training series is a wonderful collaboration between many organizations that you see listed on here. We have both school districts, Bryan ISD and College Station ISD, and we have representatives from each one here today. We also partner with the Brazos Valley Center for Independent Living, and Pat Morris is usually here, but she's not here today. If you have not heard of BBCEL, please Google Brazos Valley Center for Independent Living. It is an incredible resource in our area. And Pat is an extremely knowledgeable person and someone good to have down on your, I was going to say Rolodex, but we don't do that anymore. Put him in your phone. Because if you need information, she's a great person to reach out to. We are also partners with two parent support groups, the Down Syndrome Association of Brazos Valley and Families of Autistic Children Engaged Together for Support. I'm also the parent leader of that group. And we're all here today to help you learn about educational assessments. I am the parent of two young men. Used to say boys, but they're 17 and 18 now, so I can't say that anymore. And both have had, one had a 504 and one had an IEP, still has an IEP. So I have been through those IEP meetings for years. And honestly, it is still very, very confusing when you have your 3-year evaluation and get all that data. And so I'm also going to be listening to Jamie because I can always learn more on how to be a better advocate for my son. So just a couple of housekeeping notes we have here. If you have any questions, we're going to reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes for questions. You can raise your hand. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question out loud, in the table back there, there is a notes paper that you can use. You can jot your question at the bottom, and we'll be able, you can just rip it out, hand it to us, and we can answer it that way. Our translator is here. Lo que estaba diciendo es que si tiene preguntas en la última parte, como los 10 minutos o 15 minutos, vamos a tener tiempo para que pregunten las preguntas. Y también tenemos el papel, si no quieres decir la pregunta, la puedes escribir. También, ¿qué más? También pueden enviar un email a purposefullifebcs@gmail.com. You can also send us an email, and it can be for anyone. So if it's not for the speaker, if it's, hey, can you put me in touch with Pat, we can do that as well. And at the very end, we will ask you to fill out a survey. We would really, really appreciate if you took just those few moments to do that for us, because it does help with funding, and it also provides information on what you're interested in. So if you didn't enjoy this topic, but you have something else that you really want to learn about, put that down on the survey, and we'll definitely be able to put that on the list for next year. En los últimos 5 minutos vamos a tener una encuesta de satisfacción. Y ahí puedes poner si quieres otro tema que quieres aprender, pues también lo puedes poner ahí. Okay, so just a quick announcement. If you don't know, we do have sensory-friendly movies at the Cinemark in College Station. And the dates are on there. What do we have? We have Lyle Lyle Crocodile coming up October 15th, Wakanda Forever November 19th, and Puss in Boots December 31st. And when I say it's sensory friendly, that means that they leave the cleaning lights on for us. You can bring toys. I did that for many years with my son because my oldest wanted to watch the movies and my youngest didn't. So he would bring his trains to the movies and would play on the floor, and my oldest got to enjoy the movie. So it was great. So they have been doing that for us. Gosh, it's probably been about 8 years now. So it's really great. It is a much smaller theater. So On the off chance that you really want to go, make sure you get there before 10 because it starts right at 10 o'clock. We totally skip the previews, so don't go rolling in at 10:20 because you'll miss it. So right at 10 o'clock. Our next session is going to be November 3rd, and our speaker is Sabrina Thompson with the Partners Resource Network. That is also another great resource. If you haven't tapped into the Partners Resource Network, check them out. They provide training opportunities. They can also support you during IEP meetings. And Sabrina will be talking to us about how to create a good partnership between yourself and your IEP team. And that is critical to have a good partnership. Like, we're experts, they're experts, and listen to each other effectively and listen to what they have to share, and then they'll listen to what you have to share. It just makes everything else go so much smoothly. And today's speaker is Miss Jamie Wigley. She is an LSSP, a licensed specialist in school psychology. I should know that. We're gonna try really hard not to do acronyms because there are a lot of acronyms in education. So that is what LSSP stands for, and she's gonna be talking about evaluations. So, welcome, Jamie.
Good evening. Thank you all for letting me come. Okay, so we are going to talk about evaluations, and like Amy was just saying, there are a ton of acronyms, and you feel like you're just swimming in alphabet soup with letters that you don't know what they mean or what they're saying, and we do it multiple times a day, and we forget that we need to slow down and explain everything. So that's what I'm going to do this evening, is explain the different parts of an evaluation and the outcomes of an evaluation. So first off, what is special education? Special education is a federal program. The most recent update to that federal program was in 2004. And the purpose of it falls under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And the purpose of it is to provide services to children with disabilities, and it helps with special education, early intervention, and related services that children might need to be successful in school. So because it's a federal program, every state has its own regulations, but it will go with you anywhere you go in the United States. So if you were to pick up and have to move to a different state next week, your IEP is valid in that state. They would probably have to retest that child to make sure that they fit that state's requirements, but your IEP is valid in that state. Okay, so there are 13 categories of eligibilities that fall under IDEA for special education. And so we have autism, other health impairment, deaf and hard of hearing, deaf blindness, emotional disturbance, which relates more to behavior, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities if you have multiple medical problems, non-categorical early childhood, and that's valid for children that are ages 3 to 5, orthopedic impairment, specific learning disability, speech impairment, traumatic brain injury, and then visual impairment. Okay, so in order to get one of those categories, in order to determine if your child is eligible under one of those categories, we have to do what's called an FIE, which is a full individual evaluation. And that's where we look at all different areas to determine if they qualify for at least one area of special education. So in that FIE, we're going to look at their speech, their health, their sociological, their home background, their like developmental milestones, who they live with, all that sort of thing. And then emotional behavioral status, if they have behavior problems at school, their intelligence and adaptive skills, can they navigate a building by themselves? If you're in the grocery store with them and you told them go down there and get some bread and come back, can they do that by themselves? And then their academics, assistive technology, do they need some kind of device to help them speak and communicate, or are they able to communicate on their own? And then related services, things like occupational therapy, physical therapy, orientation and mobility for our blind students, music therapy, primarily that's for autistic students, but it's anybody that's eligible. And then of course parent training, where either consultative parent training where one person helps you without the child, or somebody can come into the home and actually help in the home. So that FIE has to be completed once that request is made, either from the campus or the parent, for that to determine if a child needs special education, and informed consent is obtained, and you sign a form saying that we're allowed to test. We have 45 school days to complete that. At the end of that 45 school days, you should get a copy of that report, and your assessment people should go over that report with you and explain if your child meets the criteria and if they don't. After that 45 days has passed, then we have 30 calendar days to hold what's called an ARD, an admission review and dismissal meeting, where we talk about if they meet the criteria, and if they do, what kind of services are we going to provide for them, and how frequently are they going to get those services. And all of those services are outlined in what's called an IEP, an individualized education program. So in that IEP, it's going to have different kinds of goals. It could be academic goals, it could be behavioral goals, it could be functioning goals if this child has issues with things like toileting, basic care needs. And then it'll also show that current performance of your child. What is your child's IQ? What is their academic ability? Are they on grade level? It'll demonstrate that for you. It'll also explain why and how they meet the criteria for special education. So that IEP will have goals, and then it'll also have accommodations. Accommodations are things that we add to the educational environment. It could be a graphic organizer for writing class. It could be a chart for math class, a number chart for math class. It could be letting them sit in the front of the room if they have trouble paying attention. It could be allowing them to take breaks, or to have extra time when they take a test, or take a test in a smaller group and not in a big class of 20 kids. There's all kinds of accommodations that are available to them. And all of those things, the goals, the accommodations, all of those things are ARD committee decisions. It's not the school people coming and saying this is what we're doing. It's an ARD committee decision, and the parent has a very important voice in that. So you need to ask as many questions as you can about what does that look like. How, anything that you don't understand, that ARD committee is the time to decide that, because there's no one person that can make that decision. It's a committee decision. So what kind of supports are available to special education? It could be that the child can be in, when we're looking at that, we want to look at what we call least restrictive environment, LRE. And that means that the least restrictive educational environment is general ed with no services and supports. So we're going to start from there, and then maybe the child just needs to be in general ed and have some accommodations. Or maybe they qualified for dyslexia and they need to get dyslexia in the general ed setting where there's a predetermined pace. Or maybe they need special education dyslexia where the instructor goes at the child's pace because they're behind enough that they can't keep up with that predetermined pace. Or maybe they need what's called in-class support, where you have a special education teacher that comes into the classroom, or an instructional aide that comes into the classroom, and maybe they come in for 30 minutes every day during math, or 30 minutes every day during reading. And that's in that schedule of services page in your IEP. So that's very important that you understand everything, all the services that they're getting. It could be that the child is multiple grade levels behind and they need to be in what's called resource, where they actually get pulled out of the gen ed setting and they work in a smaller environment, a more restrictive environment, and they work on building those gaps, bridging those gaps with reading or with math, whatever they're struggling with. There can be, there are some behavior support programs for children that really struggle with their behavior. So in Bryan ISD, we have what's called Flex and Pass, and those are behavior support programs that take place in the general education setting, and where people are coming in on a regular basis and checking on them, making sure their behavior is okay, if they need to get pulled out to talk to them, or whatever they need. But then we have the most restrictive behavior setting, and that's called SOAR, and that's where they stay in one classroom all day long, and they work their way out. They work their way into more classes out in gen ed. We also have a self-contained class for children that are lower functioning, that need help with things like toileting, or that need constant supervision, and we call that SAILS. And those are for children that need all that extra help and would not be able to make it on their own in gen ed.
Are there any questions?
You want me to ask you questions?
Oh, I was just wondering if, are there any questions in the audience?
Do y'all have any questions about any of that, about evaluations or IEPs or anything? Yes, ma'am.
I can start. I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to talk, so I'll start with my first one. You said there are 13 categories.
Mm-hmm.
So can your kid be in more than one category, or if there are
Yes.
more than one, it's multiple?
So the multiple is usually like many medical things that are going on. But yes, you can have speech impairment, you can have SLD, a specific learning disability, you can be other health impairment for ADHD, you can.
And then do the categories determine the possible services?
Nope, they do not. It's individualized to your child. So we're looking to see where that academic need is, where that educational need is, and then that ARD committee is going to take the data that we get in that full individual report and look and see, okay, they meet the criteria for a specific learning disability, but they really struggle with math. So we're going to really just focus on math. So it's based on individual needs of the child, based on the data that's gathered in that FIE.
I have other questions. I mean,
No, go ahead.
does anyone else have questions? I have other. You had talked about if you move to another state, you can move with the IEP, and then, but there might be different state requirements. So I just wanted a little bit of information. Like, you talked about the federal stuff, but what are the state requirements in Texas? Like, what does that mean? And
So the Department of Education sets what special education looks like, and they have definitions for all those 13 categories. But there may be some things that differ. So like in Texas, to qualify for another health impairment, you have to have a medical doctor sign off on that and say, yes, this child has ADHD, they have epilepsy, whatever it is, with an educational impact. In other states, they don't require a doctor to sign off on it. So there's some little things that are different from state to state, but the federal definitions of those are true in every state.
okay. And I mean, likely my son is going to go into like a sales type class because he's very global delayed. So what does school mean for a kid that's very global delayed, like intellectual disability, like a baby type of thing for their whole life? Like, are they learning things, or is it just like babysitting?
No. They would have goals. A lot of those goals would be functional. They want to work on like toileting independence. As they get older, they work on like day-to-day activities like cooking and cleaning, and whatever they're cognitively able to do. Like, can they count money? Can they make simple change? Things like that. So I mean, there are goals. They're trying to increase as much independence as they're cognitively possible.
And then for the accommodations, is there a list of like all possible accommodations for someone to be like, okay, I think my kid would benefit from that? Because I don't really know what accommodations are possible.
Sure.
But I know if I heard some, I'd be like, oh yeah, that would be good, that would not be good. Do you know what I mean?
So when you come to your IEP meeting, your special education teacher is going to propose a list of accommodations, and I don't know of a list per se.
Like a master list?
I don't know of a list per se, but there are lists. There are like special accommodations that go with like the STAR test, and those are pretty set in stone. But like the special education teacher is going to take the time to go through and think, what could they possibly need, and make that proposal in that IEP meeting, in that ARD. If there's something that you would like for them to get that you're not hearing, ask and see if there's a way that they can word it in there.
Yeah, because I have a friend that she didn't know she could ask for a special accommodation for PE. And so for years her kid couldn't really participate, and then she found another person who told her, and then she asked, and then her son could benefit. You know what I mean? So I'm just worried that I'm just gonna miss out.
It's better to ask and find out how that works at that specific campus than to just not know.
Thank you.
Google is your friend on that one.
Yeah.
Truly.
There's lots of.
Yeah, I just want I don't know, I want an exhaustive list. And then I can just, because I feel as a parent, everyone's like, you have to advocate for your kid. I'm like, but I don't know what I'm advocating for. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know all of the possibilities. I'm limited by my own ignorance, right?
Sure. And that's when I would ask, okay, you say schedule of services, they're going to get this for 45 minutes and this for, whatever. Ask very specific questions. What does that look like? And have your ARD committee explain it in as much detail as they can, so you know exactly what that school day looks like. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said for the evaluation, so they kind of know. Well, where do we have to ask, or who do we need to ask?
So typically, if the parent is concerned, they typically talk to the child's teacher or the school counselor or the school principal, and then they get that information to us, to the assessors.
Because I have a girl that she's 5 years old, but last year I'm pre-K, it was really hard about behavior. Every day we're calling me from school. I talked to her teacher, but they tell me I need to go with her doctor, because I was thinking, okay, maybe she has ADHD, or
ADHD.
And his doctor just said, well, she's too little to diagnose her, but I know she had behavior issues. But at school they say they cannot do all those, they cannot help her with all those programs if they don't have a note or a diagnostic or something.
So that other health impairment category, ADHD falls under that, and we, in the state of Texas, we do require a medical diagnosis for that. So yes, you would have to talk to the doctor, but regardless of whether or not you have that, if you're requesting an evaluation, then the school needs to honor that or to do something to try to help with the behavior. So I would ask again. I would ask your child's campus educator. Yes, ma'am.
Work the class support. For example, my son this year stay in flex, and they say go one class with in-class support. But I don't know how work in-class support.
So in-class support is usually like a special education teacher or an instructional aide that comes into the classroom. Whatever that schedule of service says on the IEP, it could be 30 minutes in reading, it could be 45 minutes in math, whatever that schedule says. They're the ones that come in to that class for that amount of time, and they work with your child. They may work with other children. They don't want to make it look like one child's being singled out. We're not trying to do that. But they are there to offer some extra support so that it's more than just 20 students and one teacher.
And how many students can work with the assistant in class support?
At one time?
Yes, for example, if the assistant go to the class, how many students can work with she?
It would just kind of depend on the way that the classroom is structured, but they may work with, check on one student at a time, or they may check on, sit near students and kind of check on them throughout the class. It just kind of depends on the way the teacher has the classroom set up and what kind of activity they're doing.
It's only 2 or 3 or 4?
I don't know that there's necessarily a predetermined number.
one number, maybe, you know, how many is the small group for kids?
For like a test?
No, for like support in the class. For example, in sales, the teachers say, it's me and 2 assistants, and we work with 4 kids or take the kids. How many?
It's a little bit different in general education. So if they're in a general education class, it's a little bit different because there's 20 kids, maybe more in one class. So it's going to depend on the way that, like the activity that they're doing. I don't know that there's necessarily a predetermined number every single time that they're working with.
And what is the maximum person or the most person to the assistant can work?
Can I say?
Sure.
Okay. I'm with Bryan. I see there's okay. So in class support, I'm Dan with Henry, special education for Bryan.
Would you mind going to the microphone? Thank you.
So I love in class support. It's like my area. I love it because the nice thing about in class support, it is in the gen ed setting. Our kids are accessing that curriculum with their gen ed peers. So if your child is receiving in-class support, they are in a gen ed classroom. How big can a gen ed classroom be? Well, that depends. That number changes all the time with our state. It's been 22, right? 25. So they're in that classroom, and then we decide, okay, our student who receives special services needs some in-class support. So we're gonna bring some of our sped staff, they're gonna push into the class, and they're going to help support those kids. Now, it's not going to be one-to-one, because there could be, and let's just say there's a class of 25, we could have 5 kids in there who need in-class support. We're not pushing a sped teacher in for each one of them. We're pushing a sped teacher into that classroom to support those 5 kids. Now, how that class is run depends on how that support is received. We know a lot of best practice in education is in small group. And depending on classes, and we in Bryan ISD, and I'm sure in College Station also, really push working in small groups. And so it could be when that support is in that room, they're sitting working with a small group of kids. And that might be where your student is working with that special ed teacher, or it could be working with that gen ed teacher. What we're trying to do is get that ratio of student to teacher down so that they can receive more support. That's what in-class support is. It is taking place. It's different than this in our sales or our life skills setting, because that is that self-contained room where the number is much lower. And there is more help in that room, but they're in there the whole time. Does that kind of answer your question? No. Okay, so, and your question was, what's the max? So, best practice is that we should have the percentage of ratio of sped kids. This is what you want, right? Ratio of sped kids to gen ed kids should be, should be between, it shouldn't be over half of the class. So our sped staff could push in one sped person, could be in that room helping that class, and we really don't want over 50% of the class being special ed. We really want it much lower, and we strive for it to be lower, like about 30% of the class. Did that answer it? Okay, so give us the next question.
Okay, my question is, if one assistant go to a class support,
Yes.
the class support is in flex. In class support, they go with math and one assistant support. In class support assistant, how many people or how many students take the class support, or how many students can take it? Can they, you tell me, okay, for the ID, the ideal is he working with one in class support with 6 students. or one in class support, it's the 2 or 8 students for each class, or 1 to 11 or 1 to 12. Or
Yeah, so
how many persons? What is the
I can't give you an exact number.
yeah, I know you
Yeah,
can
so
give me
what
example.
I would say is go to your school and ask that, and say what is my ratio of in my students' class, I guess, and they may be able to give that information. They may not be able to give that information.
Okay.
But I know, aren't there in supplements
In the
that
autism supplement.
they might say there's a ratio in the autism supplement of like it's 4 to 1, right? 4 students to 1 student. In class support, it won't state a specific ratio. Am I correct?
Yeah, I
Is
wanna
anyone-
Yes.
answer because my son is in a group with 26 students and they're 11 within class support and 1 assistant. And that is my question. What is
That could happen.
or maybe need another assistant for the group or 2 groups?
In class support usually means there's going to be one, our special ed staff is push in, and usually it's one sped staff to a gen ed staff. I'm not saying that there could be additional staff that could push in. There might be the speech therapist in there. If your student is receiving flex support, that flex person could be in that room when they're also receiving that in-class support. So there could be 2 sped support staff in there at a time. That could happen.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Kind of. Okay, great.
So
Thanks.
I kind of got a question on that question. So whenever your kid is in a general population class or whatever, do they try to put all of the kids that need that special help in that class so that they're only having one teacher to
No.
all of the kids who need accommodations?
No, we really, they try to spread the kiddos out, but you also have to remember, we have limited staff, right? So,
That's why I'm curious
Right.
if that's how it works.
but I know secondary because that's where I work.
Okay.
And we don't just have one in-class support or one co-teach setting. We have multiple settings and they spread those students out. Because if we put them all in one room, it now really becomes a special education class, and it's not a special education class.
Okay.
It's a gen ed class that has support. So it's a good question.
Okay.
And that also could be impacted, like, does the child play sports? Are they involved in other stuff that would automatically determine certain periods of the day?
Yeah, it's early education right now. Well, he's in elementary.
You're not there
school,
yet,
but
okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions.
My son is in 4th grade and he been on flex program. Before they were going to take him out from the class like more times. And this year been really hard with him because they changed, I think, the teacher of the program, and she forgot to go and get him from his class. But another thing is like, as he's on 4th grade, he's not gonna get that more help as before. He's autistic. So
Okay,
he's
so I want to
on a
clarify.
regular class.
He's in the classes, and flex support is pulling him and working with him in like a smaller room, smaller setting, but that's not happening this year? Or-
It's because I think they changed the teacher and my son been crying since they start school. Like, the teacher forgot to go and pick me up from my class, and he gets so frustrated. But I think they only do it once now, as before they take him out like maybe 2 times.
So what I'm gonna suggest is that you really look at your paperwork and see what it says of how many times he's supposed to be pulled. And then you need to go and talk to the principal to make sure. If you do not feel that's happening, then you need to call the school and just say that you're concerned about, is he really receiving the time he's supposed to? And they can review that with you. Now, as he gets older, are we gonna try and pull support away from him? our goal is always to have the least amount of support we need. So we're hoping that what we are providing is helping him grow and fill the gaps, and that we will need less and less support. It may not happen, that may not be the situation, but that's always our goal.
Yeah, because he's a really smart boy, and they say like he don't need that much of help. But me as a mom, I feel like he needs, like he gets so frustrated. So I don't know, like I'm saying, like I'm not sure, and I guess I'm gonna go and talk
Yep.
to the
So look at your paperwork. You've got your IEP. Look to see at what the time it says, and then yeah, please do reach out to your parents, or to your parents. I'm sorry, to your admin, and see what they and share your concerns, because really we do want to. It's a partnership. We need to work together.
And parents can ask for an ARD meeting at any time, any time. So if you have concerns like that and you're not getting the answers that you're looking for from the principal, ask to have an ARD. Is there any other questions?
I do have another question. So looking at the categories of eligibility, currently our son is 4 and he is only in this non-categorical early childhood. What is the process like when he turns 5? Like, because right now he's in PPCD, a 4-year-old classroom, but kindergarten is just gen ed. So how does the transition from his classroom to a kindergarten classroom fit into the timeline of this?
So for that non-categorical early childhood NCEC, that's valid until his 6th birthday. So your child will need to be reevaluated and have an ARD prior to their 6th birthday. So they can determine if he qualifies for one of the other 12 categories and can continue to receive special education. Now, moving from 4-year-old to 5-year-old, you have your annual ARD, and they'll talk about the supports that are available in kindergarten.
Okay.
So they'll determine whether he goes into a general kindergarten classroom or if he stays with
So that's going to be based on the amount of progress that he's made in that early childhood special education setting. And then that's what they're going to propose at that annual meeting for the next annual IEP.
Okay.
So it could be that there's a lot of progress and they need to be in gen ed kindergarten with some push in class support, or it could be that they need to be in a more restrictive environment. It's just based on the amount of progress that they're making on their goals.
Okay, and then, so you said that we can request an ARD at any time because his birthday is in the summer, so that can't happen until after the school year has already started, so his kindergarten will already start.
In those cases, we usually try to have everything done before the last day of school in the prior year.
Okay.
So that when August comes, it's settled, it's done, and first day of school, they know exactly what's going on.
Okay, and then I have one more question. How much does ABA benefit a kid if school offers so much support? Like if they're needing so many hours of ABA and they're wanting a kid to miss so much school for ABA, how much does that benefit the kid in the education system if they're being pulled so much for therapy outside of school?
It's really better if they can go the whole day in school. It's really better for them.
So we should be looking for more support from the school?
Because it's more continuous support from morning to afternoon. It helps with the social development. If they qualify for occupational therapy or speech therapy, whatever else they would be receiving in that ABA setting, we can provide in the school setting and determine if they meet the criteria.
So we need to request that more support?
You can say that you're interested in receiving those services at school.
Okay, thank you.
Do they do ABA?
No, we do not provide ABA in
But
public
there's
school.
other supports that are offered at school?
There's behavior support, yes.
Yeah, okay.
But it's not ABA.
No, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
What does SAILS stand for?
I don't know the answer to that.
It's, I should know this.
Social academic independent living.
Oh.
I don't know the answer to that. Yes, ma'am.
So I just wanted to answer her question, because I'm a gen ed teacher in secondary level, but I'm also a sped parent. So you need to verify with your principal when you do your emergency ARD what the flex information says. Does it say the student has flex support, or does it say they have flex
Any other questions?
Yeah, we don't have flex sport in every gen ed class. I'm a life example. It's different.
I don't know if you can talk about this, but Amy had said the next speaker, they have an organization that they can come with you to your art IEP meeting or whatever to provide the family support. Can you talk about that? Like when is that something that we should think about? Because I'm doing my first IEP art whatever this fall, and I just have no idea what to expect. Like, is that something I should seek out, or I don't know? Does that look bad from the school? You feel like you're getting ambushed or something? Or
I mean, that's your choice to make.
I don't want to feel like you're ambushed, but I also want someone that knows what I'm doing.
There's so many of them,
Yeah.
and everybody's an expert in their own. You know, you'll have the psychologist in there, and the speech therapist in there, occupational therapist in there. But you just have to remember they're all there to help your kid. You know, your kiddo. But at the same time, you're the advocate for your child, and you know your kid better than all of them. So what you say is really, really important. And what you want for your child.
So it really comes down to a personal choice. I am personally not familiar with the organization that's coming next month, but I can say that if you feel like you want someone to refer to, because depending on the eligibility and the different services, there is going to be different evaluators. So schools like I would evaluate for one specific area, educational diagnostician evaluates for another, speech therapist another, occupational therapist, and so on. So there are a lot of people in the meeting, but the purpose of the meeting should be that your child is successful and that you walk away feeling like your child gets every service that they need. So if you personally feel like you need somebody there to help you with that, then that's going to come down to your personal choice. But you should feel like that IEP team is on your side. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is whenever you have your kid evaluated, you have that final evaluation, is that, so like, you know, all this information for all these disabilities that you can sign them up for, is that enough, or do you still need to go get a medical doctor evaluation to be eligible for the disabilities?
So there's only one category that requires a medical documentation, and that's other health impairment.
Okay, so when you have this evaluation done, they're in
That's for
this system, that you can use that to assess their disabilities.
like for SSI. You have
Oh, yes.
to have an
Yes. So you can turn in that FIE, you can turn in the IEP to get outside assistance. Yes. Yes.
Is there any other questions? You got a question? Well, Jamie, thank you so much. We have a little bit of time, and I'm going to pull up a resource that I think is really going to be helpful for y'all. So first of all, I want to share a little bit from my own personal experience of in-class support. When my son was younger, he had one-on-one in-class support, and I was adamant that's what he needed all the time. And it ended up creating an environment where he felt like he was different than all the other kids, because no other kids had a grown-up following them everywhere. And so in 5th grade, I learned that I did not know everything, and that in fact, the other people in the IEP team did know a lot that I didn't know. And they did know my child in ways that I didn't know my child, because I'm not there, right? I'm not the teacher, I'm not there 24/7. They see him in a different light than I do. And so some of the stuff that I'm gonna share with you is about person-centered plating. And it's about, we focus so much on the health and the safety of our children that sometimes we can lose focus on what steps do they need to have a good life. Like just to have those same experiences that all the other kids are having. And those kids in general ed They don't have people following them 24/7. So we made a goal in 5th grade that by the time he was a senior in high school, we wanted him to just have a place to go if he needed to feel safe. Like just to have that quiet room. And we didn't go, okay, you go from full support to, now you have half support, It wasn't like that. It was a gradual process of everybody figuring out, okay, how long can he focus? Okay, he can focus for 5 minutes. So he obviously still needs that support, but we're gonna cut back a little bit. And every year we cut back and we cut back. And now he's to the point where he's the one in his IEP meetings, he's the one that decided when he wanted support, what he wanted that support to look like. Did he want somebody to come up to him and say, hey, do you need help? Did he want somebody to go talk to the teacher and say, how's it going? Does he need help? Did he want them just to pop their head and then he gives them a thumbs up or a thumbs down? Right? He got to decide what that looked like for him. And if we never give our kids the opportunity to make choices and be really fully involved in all their educational planning, then when they turn 18, and all of a sudden, if you don't have that guardianship, which I'm not saying, go out and get a guardianship, if your child becomes a fully grown-up adult and all of a sudden they're in charge of their education, then they're at a loss because they've never had a chance to be a part of it, they've never had a chance to speak up for themselves. So no matter how old your child is, really think about that. Am I giving my kids the opportunity to have experiences like other typically developing children? Am I giving them the opportunity to have choice and control however they can in their lives? Am I telling them about what these things mean? Do they know why people come and get them out of the classrooms and take them somewhere else? Because that is something that, when they're young, it doesn't really bother them. But when they get to that 3rd, 4th, then they're like, well, hold up. How come I have to leave and these people never have to leave? And then they start thinking, okay, what's wrong with me? So be open and honest about the support, about what they are. And yes, you know your child really, really well. But your team also knows them in a different light. And they do have really valuable information to share. I just wanted to share that because I was like, yes, full-time, one-on-one support, that's what he needs. And I was wrong, right? And I know that if I had kept fighting for one-on-one support for the rest of his education, he would not be about to start driving next week. He would not be able to stay in a 2-hour IEP meeting the entire time, do a 20-minute presentation, have a voice, and be able to say, hey, yes, you know what, I feel like I need to learn more about how to handle social situations so that I don't get upset as much if I make a social mistake. Like that was a goal that he had for himself. And at that meeting we had last year, right when he was about to turn 17, my mouth was shut about 85% of the time. And I appreciated that they were looking to him, that my team was looking to him and saying, Ty, what do you want? Tell us, right? So your team is critical, having that good relationship is critical. Yes, invite someone to your meeting, but don't make it a surprise. Like give them that courtesy of, hey, I'm gonna bring so-and-so. Because that's great. And it is very overwhelming to be sitting at that table and have so many people on the other side and you are totally lost and you don't know what's going on. I actually work with someone who was at my very first IEP meeting and she was such a great help to me that she was kind of like one of my connections. Every time I was at the meeting, I was like, yes, there she is. My one constant, because sometimes those people change, right? You gotta have specific people at the meeting and those faces change, but hopefully there's at least one that is pretty consistent, that knows your kid really well. So let me see, okay, I'm gonna pull up, the website is called chartingthelifecoursetools.com.
I'm gonna pull it up really quick, and then we're gonna talk about planning for that good life. Okay. I don't have internet, but I'm going to show you my son's life trajectory. Okay, so if you Google Charting the Life course tools, you're going to find a website that is available both in English and Spanish, and it has a lot of tools that you can download for free. And there's videos that you can watch, and it's going to teach you about person-centered planning and how person-centered planning with your child can help them achieve that vision of a good life. And you can create, this is called a life trajectory, you can create a life trajectory based on your vision of what you want for your child, and then you can have a conversation with your child and find out what their vision is. And you know, you think, oh, well, my kid's just little, but they don't know. But they do, they're gonna talk about, I wanna be a mommy, I wanna be a daddy, you know. They might already know, they might be interested in what they wanna do. Might be, I wanna be a ballerina, I wanna be a veterinarian. But when you're hearing all those things, right, think in the back of your mind, what's it gonna take for my child to get there? And you know, what experiences are other children having that I need to find whatever supports my child needs to have those same experiences, going to camp, going to parties. This is my son's life trajectory. And as you can see, there is some stuff on here that is related to school. He wants to have all A's and B's. He got all A's last semester, or last 6 weeks, so I'm really proud of him because he's working really hard on that. But you also see things like going to football games. And you'll see he wants to have his license before he finishes 11th grade, and we are on target for that. We've been working on it. So we pull this up constantly and we talk about it. We talk about his goals and we talk about, you know, what's it gonna take? Okay, you said you wanted to go to a football game. You know, what's it gonna take for you to go to the next football game? Do you have friends you wanna go with? You know, what do you do at a football game? Right? My son is autistic. We'll use identity first language with him, or he calls himself autistic. And so we talk about, okay, football games are really, really loud, and sometimes you struggle with loud noises. You know, what are some things we can do if you get overwhelmed? Who are some people that you know that are gonna be at the game that are, you know, your safe people, or people that know you really well. You can go talk to them if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So there was discussions about going to a football game. And so that helps him become a student at Bryan High, right? Just like all the other students. So he's not the student that is in a room and the kids in that room know him, but nobody else knows him. When you walk down the hall, people are like, hey, Tade. I mean, you can't walk down the hallway without somebody saying hi to him. He is pretty famous, pretty popular. So you're gonna create one of these. I hope you do, because it's gonna get you to start thinking about things like camp and doing chores and learning about money. We had a goal about learning how to budget. That goal did not work. But the moment it was real money, because we were budgeting with points.
with like behavior points or something like that. He didn't care about that. But the moment it was real money tied to a debit card, because now there's those kind of like kid debit cards you can get, they're called green light cards that we have. And that was huge because all of a sudden it was real money. He had a card like mom that he could use anywhere, and he did his chores, and he had his list of chores he had to do, and he made money like I make money. And that money, right, he gets to choose what he does with that money. And it turns out he's a saver, so he will save some, but he spends some. And he will buy his pencils, but he'll also buy tissues, because tissues are really important to him. He's a kid that likes to be well prepared. Right? So the moment it was real, then it was important, and he wanted to learn about it. So when we're talking about these goals, just random things that are going to come into my mind. So when you're talking about these goals that you have that deal with health and safety, and you're really kind of not going anywhere, you want to make sure that you're tying that to something that is important to your child, something that brings them joy, comfort, fulfillment. One of the other goals that we had when he was little was learning how to tie his shoes. Right, that was important to me. I was like, that is a huge skill. He needs to learn how to tie his shoes. And that was on the IEP for years. And it didn't really ever work. And finally we dropped it because, I decided, okay, Velcro shoes are a thing, and we'll just go with Velcro shoes. And then as he got older, it was shoes that you pull on. And, and as the technology got better, now there's, before it was harder to find shoes that weren't tie shoes, but now you find them everywhere. But last summer, he said, Mom, can you take me to the store? I said, sure. I said, what are you gonna get? He said, I'm gonna buy a pair of shoes. And I said, oh, okay. So he goes in the store, all by himself with his card, right? Because we've been working on this for several years now of him being able to go to the store independently. And again, that didn't happen overnight. That was practicing, how do you do this? Here's how you put your card in and all that stuff. And he comes back with shoes that have laces. And I said, oh my goodness, you pick shoes with laces. Can I ask why you pick shoes with laces? And he said, I want to be a dad, and I want to be able to teach my kids how to tie their shoes. Right? So all of a sudden, something that I was trying to force on him, that it wasn't important to him. The moment there was something tied that was important to being a dad and being able to teach us skills to his kids, he learned it really, really quickly. Same with learning how to ride a bike. That was another skill that I was like, you gotta learn how to ride a bike. I mean, that's a thing that all kids do. And he didn't care about it. The moment he learned that, hey, getting to ride a bike, I can go places. And he learned in a day, because he was already 14 at that time, and he is like a man, huge. So he learned in a day how to ride a bike. And I was like, yay, you know how to ride a bike. Yeah, I can ride around the neighborhood. Oh no. He wanted to ride his bike on campus at Texas A&M, crossing roads, right? Being around cars. And that really freaked me out. And at first I was like, oh, what? No way. You have to stay in the neighborhood. That was my plan, but that wasn't his plan. So then we went back to, okay, what's it gonna take for him to be able to ride his bike around town? Because hey, that's a form of transportation. And if he has a job and he, doesn't have his license in the future, because he was 14 at this time, you can ride a bike to work. So then we practiced that. And then he was like, see ya. Right? So then we learned that skill for transportation. And then he decided, you know what, Mom? I really want to learn how to ride a bus. Because on the bus, you can get a lot farther. So then I hired a student to teach him how to ride the Brazos Transit bus. And he rides a Brazos Transit bus from school, all on his own, every day. And he figured out a hack that he could ride this line instead of this line and get home in like 20 minutes instead of the route that I thought was the right route, but apparently I didn't know. So, So things are scary, they're really scary, and we want to hold our kids and keep them safe, but we got to think that if we do that, we're holding them back. We're holding them back from achieving those same goals that we achieved ourselves. So make sure that you are always thinking of that future, right? And what's it going to take? And all kids learn, all children learn. It may take longer, it may look different, but your child is not going to be a baby their whole lives. So, when you're thinking about these goals that you're developing, right, think about that future that you want for your child. Where do you want to see them in the future? Do you want them to have a job? Do you want them to go somewhere where people care about them and people wonder, where are you? You weren't here last week. I missed you. Right? If we keep our kids away from life, then they're not going to achieve that vision of a good life. So go to chartingthelifecoursetools.com and check it out and have those conversations with your kids and find out, right? This doesn't have to be when they're 30. You can do a life trajectory for next month, right? What are we going to do this month? And take some steps towards that. Right? It could be, for my son, he does it kind of for each semester. This is what I want to do this semester, but he also has one for older. Speaking of siblings, we do have the sibling support group, which unfortunately kids don't really sign up for. So I'm gonna plug that. If you have children without disabilities, bring them. So they have an opportunity to meet other siblings and learn about themselves, right? We're not necessarily gonna be talking about disabilities. It's gonna be their time to just have time for themselves. I'm really sad to say that I was so hyper-focused on making sure that I was doing everything right for my youngest that my oldest, who was very accomplished, kind of got left behind a little bit. And he's 18 now. And last summer we went, I don't remember where, but it was 3 hours away. And it was just the two of us. And I said, hey, how about we talk for 3 hours? And he was so excited. He was like, yeah, let's talk. So we had a big old conversation about this. And I honestly had never had that conversation with him. Right? Because I was like, he's gonna figure it out. I don't have to help him. But I learned that, I knew he wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't know that he already knew what school district he was hoping to work at. And he knew, he wanted to be there because he's a musician and the art and music scene is really good. And so that gave me more information about who he was and the things that he is enjoying and what he wants to see in his future, that he saw himself eventually becoming a music professor and being married and having kids, but not until he was 30, right? So, don't do this just with your kids with disabilities. Do it with all your kids, right? And take those moments with your children and talk to all of them. Okay, I think that is it for me. If you have any questions about person-centered planning or charting the life course, feel free to come up and ask. If we have lots of experts here, so if there's any other random education questions you have, now's the time, because we still have 10 minutes. So if you have any more questions.
Can they introduce themselves?
Sure. Would y'all mind coming up here and introducing yourselves?
I have accommodation information for you also, so I was gonna do that. I'm Lindsay Crumrine. I'm a behavior specialist, secondary for College Station ISD.
I'm Megan Gardner. I'm our autism and low incidence disability specialist for secondary for Bryan ISD.
I'm Tonette Smith, transition coordinator from Bryan ISD.
Tonette Smith, transition coordinator for Bryan ISD.
Dana Henry, secondary special education coordinator for Bryan ISD.
Mandy Grassi, secondary instructional coordinator.
There is a website called acentral.education, and it's linked in through the TEA website, which is great to navigate, but has lots of hidden treasures, right? So that website has an interactive, it's interactive accommodations, and so you can look at whether it's different content areas or different needs, different types of accommodations, and it will not only tell you different kinds, but it also kind of describes how they're implemented. So it's a really cool interactive tool that you can just go in and play with, because like everyone said, there's not like an exhaustive list of accommodations, but it can give you a really good idea of some of the more common things that you might see or hear. acentral.education.
acentral.education. And that has a list of accommodations, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay. So acentral.education to find out more about accommodations. I did want to say something else. So when you are requesting an evaluation, make sure you're doing that in writing, because it is important to keep track of your communication with everyone. And that's not for, to like catch people or anything like that, but it's, it's great. You can say, hey, on this day I requested, and, I learned that there's so many days, before you need to respond and all that. So it helps you to keep track of that. Having a binder, taking notes, all of that is really, really helpful so that you're not sitting there with like random papers everywhere and you're going, oh, I need to read my IEP documents, where did I put them? So really, really organize yourself really well. And there's lots of resources on organizing IEP documents. You just Google and you'll find a whole bunch of things. You don't have to sign the IEP document right then and there. You can have time to read it. And can someone help me out with the days? Is it 5 days? Thank you. So you get 5 calendar days? 5 calendar days. So you can say, I'd like to, school days. Okay, 5 school days. So once you're finished with that IEP meeting, and that you talk for a long time and everybody said lots of things, you don't have to sign it right then and there. You can say, I'm going to take my 5 days to read it. And then you can, get somebody to help you if you're a little bit confused on what those things are. Really read it, because sometimes people do make mistakes. So, they might say, okay, you're going to get 30 minutes of in-class support in English. And, last year it was 20 and they figured out, okay, we need a little bit more, but it still said 20 because they just forgot to change it. Then you just say, hey, remember we said we were going to up this to 30, can you change it? And they will. They want it to be correct, just like you do. So you have that time to read it. Okay. And that is one of the things, so the Partners Resource Network, they do what they call IEP clinics, and those are really helpful. I don't think they've had any locally in a while, but she's located in Huntsville, so I know she's having some in Huntsville. And that is just a time where you sign up and you go with your documents, and you can prepare for an IEP meeting. They can review them and give you advice, and it's free. So you can do that. I don't think they have. In the past, they were able to like come with you to the meetings, but I believe that now it's changed more towards helping the parent learn how to be the best advocate they can be, because they just don't have enough people to go to everyone's meetings. But it takes, you have to show that you're willing to learn on your own, right? So it's not just always somebody coming to you with a meeting and then you don't understand, because you have somebody with you that is, an expert, right? So you need to educate yourself, and there's so many trainings online, and really, really take the time to understand it. And it doesn't happen overnight, or at least for my brain, it didn't happen overnight. It's still not 100% there, but I definitely am a lot stronger than I was when we started. And just, everybody's a great resource in your school district. So don't be afraid to reach out and say, I'm really confused. Can you explain what's going to happen in this first meeting? How do I prepare? And when you have your evaluation results, I should be calling you and explaining those to you so you're not sitting there at the meeting hearing it for the first time, because those numbers are very confusing. And then the one last thing. Look at that, I use it almost all the time. Start your IEP meetings with sharing the great things about your kids. And there has been, I have noticed that, things are changing in IEP meetings, and like at Bryan ISD, they really are starting with, these are the great positive things about your kids, these are your kids' strengths. That doesn't mean that all school districts do that. So when you're gonna sit there and you're gonna hear deficits, and they can't do this and they can't do this, that can be really heartbreaking, right? You're hearing all these things your kids can't do. So you started off on a positive note, right? We're here to talk about my son. And my son is kind and caring and smart, and he is great at Minecraft. He can do all these things, right? And just started off on that positive feeling, because it really sets the tone. And it lets them know, because you're always, you're typically going to have somebody that doesn't know who your child is. And that's your opportunity to introduce your child in a positive manner. And then, then you pull this out and start talking about that great life. Okay. All right, well, we are done. Go ahead and go get your kiddos. I don't know if there's any food left, but if there is, feel free to go back there and grab some, and hopefully we will see you next month. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, contacted.
Let me end this.